Peter, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here, Phil. Thank you.
So I'm Phil. I'm a partner at Webisoft. This podcast is an idea from our marketing department, and so far they've been bang on. Makes for interesting conversations with world-class experts. Today we have one with us. Peter, do you want to take a couple minutes to explain who you are and what you do?
Sure. The name's Peter Duncan. Interestingly, as we've been discussing, Phil, I am Canadian. Started
Hmm.
as a geologist more in the hard rock.
Elbows up, they say.
Yeah, from uh, from the East Coast, so I'm a down homer. But I've been a geophysicist now for, I guess, more than 50 years. I did my first field geophysics in 1970, if you can imagine.
That's before my time.
Yeah, I can tell. Did grad school in Toronto, worked for Shell out in Calgary, ended up in Houston, changed from mining geophysics to oil and gas, started an oil company in the 90s that actually took public, me and two other guys, and drilled some wells that we had no business drilling. Got crushed in the dot-com era of
What
1999.
does that mean though? What does that mean? Had no business drilling.
Well, if you're really going to be in the oil business, you have to have enough money, enough staying
Oh,
power
I see.
to go through the peaks and the troughs. And we were playing some rich plays. Shoot, I participated in drilling a well offshore Africa. We didn't have the money to play that. We were at the wrong table. We should have been
Mm,
at the $5 table, and we were playing at the $50 table.
had the high stakes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of crashed and burned on that one, sold it out, and then I started a company called Microseismic Inc. in 2003. I'm choking up with the remembrance of losing my shirt in the oil company, and
Experience, has a cost, right?
it does. So started this company to do something a little different, to do passive seismic as opposed to exploration conventional seismic. Passive seismic is to conventional seismic as a stethoscope is to an ultrasound. So rather than sending signals in and getting the reflections, we were simply putting our geophones on the surface of the earth, listening to the squishy sounds coming out from the interior, squishy sounds that were a result of interactions by the engineers with the oil field, so that we could interpret those, gather them, interpret those in terms of what was going on in the field dynamically. A lot of seismic takes kind of a snapshot of what the reservoir looks like. We're listening in real time to how the reservoir is changing, and that can sometimes help them do the production, the exploitation a little better. Started that, kind of got caught up in the shale gale, because when the shales started to develop, the people were realized they had to do
Hmm.
hydraulic fracturing in the shales, and hydraulic fracturing is kind of blind if you can't see what's going on. And by see, I mean we're creating images with sound.
Yeah.
But that technology, the passive seismic technology, microseismic technology, was particularly appropriate to helping the engineers understand what happened to the reservoir when they did the hydraulic fracturing. And we kind of got on a real hockey stick of growth through 2005 to 2012 or so, largely driven by monitoring hydraulic fracturing in the shale plays in the US and around the world. Mostly the US, but around the world as well. Canada, Argentina, China, England.
And when you say you hit a hockey stick curve in growth, you mean your company?
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. The company kind of started in my spare bedroom in 2003, and by 2012, or rather 2012, we had 250 employees and crews working around the world. It was exciting times. Things kind of changed a bit in that we were a bit of a victim of our own success, and that the engineers began to feel that they had cracked the code on how to do
Mm.
their fracking, and so they weren't having to use us quite as often. And then in 2015, 2016, the oil business changed from a growth business to a value business, and
Right.
all of a sudden there was a lot more emphasis on expenses, and we're expensive. So our business actually started to pull back, and then COVID hit. And oh wow, that was terrible. Nearly went out of business. Nearly went bankrupt. Came this close to declaring bankruptcy in 2020. But we managed to pull through, and we're growing again, and we're back up to around 50 employees. And
Oh wow, okay, nice. What saved you, in your opinion, when you said you came really close?
what saved us really was, I suppose, persistence, not closing the door. Some of our competitors closed the door. And I say persistence. We actually, I told you that in 2012 we were 250 employees.
Yes.
In 2020, I brought us down to 5 employees who were on half salary to
Mm,
try to keep the physical plant working. I laid myself off, drew unemployment for a year, but continued because I'm too old to hire. So I got to continue to spend my time on unemployment, uh, continuing to market, sell, build the company. And we kept, I suppose it's a Canadian thing, but I kept all the people that I'd furloughed on their health care.
yeah.
And slowly I started identifying some work that was coming back once we could get back into the field. And we just built it one project at a time back up. So what kept us? Persistence.
Yeah. Restructuring. I mean, you seems like you restructured at the right time, right? Essentially.
Yep.
Uh, I
And I
mean,
think the other thing that happened is we had been, because of the shale gale, where we were sort of drinking out of a fire hose trying to keep up
yeah.
with the work.
This is your second person today to use that expression.
We became a one trick pony, or we were
Mm,
by default a one trick pony. And with the downturn, we went and cast our eyes to other applications of our
hmm.
technology that might have legs, and we started building other verticals and have continued to do that. And that's now the frac monitoring is down to about 50% of our revenue, and
I see.
we have some other enterprises that are still tangentially related to what we grew the company on, but different and subject to different commodities, or subject to different price variations.
I see. In hindsight, do you feel you got complacent a little bit? Like you basically having no friction selling, I guess the one thing you were doing very well. Like, do you wish you had diversified a little bit more at the time, or was it really like impossible to predict?
Well, when I started the company, I had no interest in building a company. I think I mentioned to you before that I had started an oil company and taken it public and that sort
Yeah,
of thing. Uh, that experience taught me that I'm more of a techie and a
sure.
service company guy than I am. I deserve to be on the sell side, not the buy side. So
Yeah,
when
I
I
see.
started this company, it was actually I had encountered this technology, an individual who was a MacArthur Genius Grant fellow who had this IP that he wanted to turn into monetize for his retirement. And so I started this company as an idea to take his technology, make it practical, and then sell it to a strategic. No business. I had no interest in building a long-term company. I thought I'd be doing something else by say 2010 or 2011.
Hmm.
Um, but the company, as I said, we kind of experienced a hockey stick, and then we were venture capital supported, but we did a private equity deal at a really nice valuation in 2010, the end of 2010, and that changed the direction of the company. Then the exit for a private equity firm is typically an IPO. So we
Yeah.
started to restructure the company to do an IPO, brought in another CEO. I stepped aside, became chairman,
Hmm.
and we kind of went along in that direction until, as I indicated, the industry started to fold back, and we lost our stand-in CEO, and I went back into the job to try to keep us afloat. And through all of the hurly burly of that, we just didn't have the bandwidth to explore other verticals.
Right. Because you're essentially trying to survive, and
Yep.
yeah.
And as soon as we knew we were going to survive, and the we had the time and the interest and the need, I suppose the need as much as anything, we
Hmm.
started to look for other opportunities for our technology. And in fact, interestingly enough, one of them found us. We 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 actually were approached by an enterprise out of Florida, a mining company actually, who had some problems with karst sinkholes opening up beneath their facility. And they actually approached us and said, "Do you think you could hear a sinkhole when it's still submerged, a cave that's growing upwards? Do you think you could hear the spalling of the material off of the roof of the cave early enough for us to be able to drill into it and fill it full of cement before it opens up underneath
Oh
our
wow.
facility?"
Okay. Yeah.
And so we ended up going down and doing some tests with them for 18 months, and we convinced ourselves and them that we had a chance at being able to do this. And so we installed a prototype device around their facility. And within 18 months, we'd actually successfully identified a hole before it opened up. They really did drill into it and they filled it full of cement. And their past experiences had been in the $100 million range for damage. We saved them that. So that kind of that was part of the rebuild of the company, that revenue. And interestingly, that technology, or the way we deployed our technology for that application, was spot on for deploying the technology around monitoring carbon sequestration um, sites.
Mm.
So in 22, 23, people started to get excited about capturing carbon and sticking it in the ground, and you have to monitor where it's going and whether it's
Yeah.
creating earthquakes. And the way we had built the business in Florida uh, sort of was appropriate for doing this long-term monitoring of sequestration sites. And the government of the DOE in the U.S. gave us a grant to build a prototype specifically directed at doing this sequestration, carbon sequestration monitoring, and to deploy it in the field, which we did last summer. And we're now sort of in that business as well, although the sequestration business is not taking off as fast as everyone predicted in 23, 22, 23. It was predicted to be tens of $1 billion of business, or nearly a $10 billion business now, as we move towards trying to get to zero carbon or
Oof.
whatever, and it just hasn't taken
Why
place.
do you think that is?
Well, number one, the sequestration, there's not much money in it. You know, if you're
Hmm.
finding oil and gas, there's money in it. The product you produce, you can
Yeah.
sell. If you're sticking CO2 in the ground, you're just putting it away, and that's a total expense. And
Yeah. You almost do it, I guess, because of regulations, perhaps,
well, you
or
do it because of regulations, and in Canada, they regulated to make you have to do it, or
yeah,
you'd get fined.
you get
In
fine.
the
Yeah.
U.S., they tried to use the carrot approach, and they gave you tax credits if you
Mm.
put CO2 away. But the tax credits, even though they doubled them in 22 or 23, those tax credits are not enough typically to
Yeah.
pay the cost.
Yeah.
And while there are people who are trying either to so that they can appear green or be green or whatever, trying to make that a business, the economics are really, really thin.
Yeah. They're hard.
So that hasn't really worked. And then the emphasis seems to have died off. The
A
realization,
little bit, huh? I mean,
yeah,
even from like, I'm not even from that world at all, and like, it used to be green everything, and we need to move to EVs, and it needs to happen in the next 2 years, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what, like,
yeah,
it can happen one day, and seems like there's too many problems around the globe to really focus on that one specifically, perhaps, or just the enthusiasm from the public maybe has died down a little bit.
I think the enthusiasm has died down. But one of the things that is certainly driving it, I believe, is that we have what, 7, 8 billion people on the earth, whatever,
Yeah, eight, I think now.
and 1 billion of us are really supplied with energy and have the freedom or the luxury of being able to say, well, I might be able to push back on my use of oil and gas and try to go electric
Sure.
and things like that.
Yeah.
There are 7 billion people in the world who want to have the same lifestyle that I do.
Yeah.
And if oil and gas is the way, or well, let's put it this way, they're not going to worry so much about carbon emissions as they are about having a lifestyle. And if 7/8 of the world is still pushing forward, it's,
Yeah.
I think the other billion start to lose their enthusiasm.
Yeah. It's the same way you said you can really focus on finding new verticals when you are trying to, make the
Yeah,
company survive. It's the same thing. Like
same
you're not going to worry about carbon emissions when I have to figure out how to get from point A to point B or how to find food.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So in your in your new structure, I guess, and in the company at the current time, and as your position of CEO, what do you do most of the day? Like, what takes up most of your day?
Gosh. So,
Podcasts is one.
well,
We know that.
I do podcasts and I do a lot of talking and sort of evangelizing, if you like. And but I am at heart a techie, and so I try to spend a fair amount of my time with. I have a small development group, and I try to spend a fair amount of my time reviewing the projects that we have done and before they get sent out to make sure the quality's there, and reviewing the projects we've done with an eye to how can we do, where are the opportunities to develop our technology better, and then working with the tech group testing and do that. So I probably spend maybe 20% of my time, not on a given day but over a longer period, on that. But I
Hmm.
spend a lot of time on forecasting strategic decisions, looking for partnerships. I get, coming over the transom all the time, people saying, well, could we merge? And so always looking for the next opportunity to do something and take the company to the next level. I spend a significant amount of time on that. And then there are the people knocking on your door who don't like the other guy at the water cooler.
Yeah. Yeah.
These personnel issues take a lot of time.
What I do is, so we have a complaint box at the office, and there's a shredder inside it. So people, no, we keep making jokes about that, like with the, because we don't really have an HR department, and we're about 40 on the team, so we're not like huge. But that's always been in the back of our minds because I used to have an HR department back in the day in my other company, and you really need to find the people that are going to be able to kind of diffuse situations, right? If they amplify them, then it's no good. It just adds to your workload because now you have more problems to solve.
Yep, if, absolutely. And when you've hired somebody and invested in them, and then they go down that road, it often is a difficult decision to make a change. Well, if you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, you've run into problems in your business, say technical problems or problem
Hmm.
with a client or something like that, and you always, your first defense is to try to fix that. And it's the same with people. Your first defense is to try to fix that, and when you get to a point where you say, I've got to prune the tree, uh, always say that a good gardener knows when it's time to prune, and you do have to sometimes pull plants out of the garden for the sake.
Yeah, there are bad roots.
But those are hard decisions.
Yeah.
But what I found, I used to tell people that uh, when a company is kind of less than 20 people, it's usually pretty smooth sailing. But somehow,
Yep.
when you get up to 20, 25 people start to break into groups, and then the
Yep.
management gets exponentially more difficult.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, obviously we're kind of making generalizations, but it's true that there seems to be some kind of there's different levels, right? Tiers, let's say, and like I think 20, 25 definitely is a tier. I think the next one that I keep hearing is 50,
Yeah.
and then it's probably like 250 or something like that, right? Then because the same problems you have at 50 probably are fine until like you get to a bigger size. And it's going to be interesting to see how that changes because um, nowadays you see more and more companies that are having tremendous success and growth with limited number of employees. And obviously AI is a big part of that.
Sure.
But you'd have like a Telegram, for instance, which is I think they're like 40 and they're worth, you know, multiple billions of dollars, right? And they make a ton of money. Um, so you don't really need like now like the size of the company or the revenue of the company is not really linked to the number of employees anymore. Like it could be you could be a one man company and be worth billions of dollars technically.
I understand. I haven't figured that formula yet.
No, and you know we're in the service business. I think you are as well, right? So it's hard to decouple revenue growth and personal growth.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's getting easier because people are more productive these days with AI, and especially in you know in software like in programming. Um, and automation is taking a big part as well. And I'm
Yep.
curious to hear your thoughts about that. Like, how do you use AI within your company, if at all? And like, what are you excited about on the automation side?
Geophysics, geophysics in general, forever has been about pattern recognition. And
Mm,
so even when I did my PhD, I was doing inversions of large data sets as large as I could get into a computer at the time and trying to create or take the data that I had observed in the field and from it find patterns that would match my forward models to infer and interpret what I was seeing in the earth. And the entire history of geophysics is one of doing pattern recognition.
yeah.
Back in uh, between my little oil company and when I started this company, I worked for a company that actually uh, took an algorithm that had been developed in the genomics industry and was applying it to the automated interpretation of seismic data. So we had a set of basis functions that were in fact pixels, the colors and the hue or whatever of pixels, and we were pixelating our seismic images and then doing pattern recognition. And it was really machine learning rather than AI, but we were calibrating what those patterns looked like
I
with
mean,
real
machine
bells.
learning is part of AI, right? Like AI is kind of a generic buzzword for,
Sure.
yeah.
And so machine learning and that sort of thing, it has been part and parcel of our practice in geophysics forever. And so in our passive seismic, where we're recording the snap, crackle, pop of things happening as the earth moves at depth, we're using a pattern recognition algorithm to identify where, when, and how the earth moved at depth. And so that's machine learning. We are actively taking advantage of the newer and faster GPUs,
Hmm.
NVIDIA computers, and whatever, to do better and better and faster and less eyes on glass, if you like, to interpret our data and identify these earthquakes and characterize them and create the images and the knowledge that we have. Now, on the other side, there is kind of, and I think of it as different, but there is sort of the language driven machine learning or AI, chat GPTs, those sorts of
Hmm.
things. And we are actively employing those or let's say beginning and developing a practice of employing those to write our reports and
Okay, yeah.
and remove some of that effort. We haven't moved into the financial controls of the company using those tools, but they're there and we're looking at them and how we can take advantage of that to make us more efficient. So to me, this isn't a break, a cliff, so much as it is just a continuum of what we've always been doing.
Right. More accessible, perhaps.
Certainly, it's getting better. I mean, what I was doing in 2000 with the pattern recognition then compared to what we're doing now is hugely different in terms of the speed and the volume of the data that we're inverting and stuff like that.
Yeah. Have you tried training models on your data?
Sure. When I say machine learning, and so we'll take what we believe to be the right answer, and that's kind of the forward model, and then use those as the images or the as the training set. And I guess, in fairness, the use of the inversions that we used to do, or the way that we recognize patterns or did the match between the lookalike and what we were seeing in our data, used to be standard things like L2 norms or L1 norms, things like that, um, in frequency space or wave number space or whatever. More and more, we're moving to neural nets
Hmm.
where it's difficult to put a specific interpretation on the set of bases. So your basis functions are now your nodes, right? Your neurons in your neural net, and it's at least for me, it's difficult to put a physical interpretation on what each one of those nodes means.
Mm.
We just let the data determine it.
Right.
But we're moving more and more into doing that, and certainly the newer computers are allowing for that, whereas in the past we didn't have that opportunity.
Are you working on, so obviously you kind of like, you said you're reinventing a little bit of the company and then looking at new verticals, and your current products, are they mostly automated or are they human controlled?
There's still a lot of human interaction, uh, and a lot of that is driven by the fact that the problems we're solving are terribly underdetermined. That is, there are many, many, many more answers than we have observations. There are many more parameters and unknowns in the model than we have data points.
Okay, I see.
We usually end up at the end of the day having to impress or use the knowledge of our interpreter to kind of push the answer in the right direction.
Mm.
So
So you
yeah,
need a human in a loop essentially, because so the AI is gonna make some determinations, but then you have to refine the thinking with experience.
yep. And I will tell you, in my personal experience, I mentioned to you that I did a lot of inversion when I did my PhD. And I kind of went into industry saying, well, look, if I can build a forward model, then I can invert any data. And the answer was that was naive, because of what I said in terms of the problem being underdetermined.
Yeah.
Well, I have, even within the last 2 years, I've hired a data scientist and I've shown him my problem, and he said, "Oh hell, we can do that with a neural net. It just has to be this many layers, and away we go." And I said, "Okay, go ahead, have at it."
Show me. Yeah.
And he's come back 6 months later and said, "This is a little bit more difficult than I anticipated."
I really feel my VP of engineering would have the same experience. He's very much like, yeah, we can do that. And then, if it gets super complex like that, oh yeah, maybe I underestimated it a little bit.
So what we end up doing, and the way I try to school these guys after, is
Yeah.
that don't try to. In fact, I think of anything that's inverse theory like this, rather than trying to find the answer, because we can't. There's too much uncertainty.
Yeah.
Tell me the bounds. Well, tell me what can't be the answer.
Hmm.
Give me the exclusion zone, and then I'll bring in a human who will pick the best
The best
within,
guess, essentially.
and that can shorten their time, because if we can exclude 90% of the solution space with a machine, and then have the user only have to deal with 10% of the solution space, we can get to the answer much faster.
Yeah. It's the same thing in programming. My business partner is CTO, and he says basically what he does now is he doesn't code, he just erases code, right?
Right?
He doesn't write code, he removes because
Makes
so
sense.
AI is going to do like 90-95% of the work correctly, and then that last 5% basically makes or breaks a project that still needs a human to do that.
Sure.
to really kind of bring it all together. And so
Yep.
it's same thing, I guess,
I think
everywhere.
it's identical. It's exactly the same thing.
That's why, like, obviously it's tough to predict the future with AI and where it's going. And, are we going to have AGI or something like that? But it seems like for the foreseeable future, there's always going to be that last percentage that's almost not, that we can't get fully with an AI. It still needs a human in the loop somewhere.
I hope so because that's kind of where
I
the
hope so, yeah.
it's
Otherwise, we're
kind of where
screwed
the
up.
fun is. It's
Yeah.
kind of where the fun is really. I think even as we sort of strip away the outer peelings of the onion and allow AI to do more and more, every time we strip away something, we're going to find new problems to work on.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Just like, job displacement in a way where everyone's worried about, and rightfully so, that, a lot of jobs are going to be automated and replaced, but most likely that's going to happen is new jobs will be created, right? New jobs that didn't exist before.
You bet. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like a prompt engineer that never existed.
Well, we used to have, and we probably, I guess if we moved into another field, people are talking about how we today in the shale fields, we're drilling. Oh, we've got less than two or 300 rigs drilling a fraction of the number of wells that we were 10 years ago. And yet our production is up by a factor of two.
Hmm.
We're just doing more with less. But when you have that production, you're creating those resources, that cash flow, it allows you to then start to do other things, to approach the problems in new ways and find ways to keep people employed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And maybe, universal income at one point could be in the cards. Who knows? Final question for you, Peter. Everybody says the same thing, by the way, to that one. So we'll see if you stay in line or have a different opinion.
Oh,
But
now you've thrown down the gauntlet.
I have. What do you feel is a blocker to innovation in your industry? Is it tech, resources, or culture?
There is certainly a cultural aspect to it.
Hmm.
There is a kind of don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So don't come forward with ideas that you say are going to make the product better, faster, cheaper when I'm already satisfied, when
Yeah.
when it's good enough. But my biggest problem right today in innovating within our company is that I I don't have the people coming into the company anymore
Mm.
who are innovative and trying and can provide that leg up to the next development within my little segment. They're going to work for you. Those
Yeah.
smart
It's
kids are,
my fault.
yeah, it's your fault. They're going to work for you. They're going to other, or um, I mentioned how we had to lay off a lot of people through 2020. And when I go and try to get the good ones to come back, they say, oh, I don't want to be in the oil and gas industry.
Mm.
It's got a bad rep. And
Yeah.
also, it's cyclic, and I get laid off every 3, 4 years. So I'm
Yeah.
going somewhere else. And that is the difficulty I'm experiencing. Sure, there are cultural pushbacks, and you've got managers who get in the way, and there are cost things. But right now, the biggest problem I have is getting a workforce, and I think our entire industry is this way. The geophysical industry certainly is getting a workforce that is really motivated and driven and excited about pushing our technology forward. And I think there are lots of opportunities to push this technology forward yet to be made.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I'm in the exact opposite situation where if I if I and you're, rightfully pointed it out. I mean, tech a couple of years ago was a little bit of a cutthroat thing for recruiting, right? It was essentially, like there were very few good candidates, and I had to dig really deep, especially because we cover pretty obscure technologies that few master, and so we had to hire almost anywhere on Earth. trying to stay in Canada, of course. Now, I open a job post, I get 1,000 candidates in 2 days, right? And they're almost all, most of them are going to be in the region that I want. So it's kind of flipped. Um, multiple reasons for that. Obviously, AI coming up, but also the hype of AI is
Sure.
it's more hype than actuality, where everybody kind of slowed down hiring, and so now there's and mass firings have happened, and so now there's a flood of candidates. Not an easy time for the young people coming into work as a developer or a programmer, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So tell them to come back
Well,
to physics.
maybe I
Speaking of
will
physics.
actually. Yeah, we'll talk offline. We'll make some deal here. I'm
Okay.
gonna I'm gonna convert some candidates
You're going to turn
to you.
yourself into a recruiting agency.
Yeah, hey, listen, we have to adapt, as they say. Peter, this was great. Really appreciate you coming on.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Phil.